James chapter 4, verse 13. James chapter 4, verse 13. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city and spend a year there and engage in business and make a profit. Yet you do not know what your life will be like tomorrow. You are just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. Let's keep in mind that this letter that James wrote, he wrote to Christians. More specifically, he wrote to Jewish Christians throughout the Roman Empire. And he is now addressing this issue of a mindset that can creep into you and I as human beings. And he uses the illustration of those who are engaged in various types of business. And these business people say, you know what? I'm going to make some plans. I'm going to go here. I'm going to set up my business. I'll be there about a year. I'll make my fortune, and then we'll decide to go from there. Now, please understand, James is not against business people. If you are a business person, this is not like, oh, I feel so bad for you. James is just using a business person as an illustration of how we can fall into the pattern of planning our lives. Certainly, this pattern is not only for people who are involved in business. But one of the aspects of a person involved in business is the need to plan. I mean, if you're involved in a business and you don't plan, you're probably not going to accomplish much. If you don't plan on having some supplies, if you're going to make something, now back then, there was limited industry back then. But if you were going to make something out of wood, if that was your job, you were a carpenter, you had to do some planning, like where are you going to get the wood? I don't think Lowe's was in business back then. You were pretty much responsible to go get your own wood. You had to make plans. I need to go get some wood. And when I get this wood, this is what I'm going to make. And I'm going to design it this way. And it's going to take me about this long to make it. And then once I make it, I've got to charge something for it. And so I've got to figure out what am I going to charge for it. This is the aspect of business. It's the same thing that goes on today. Companies want to make a product and sell a product, but they've got to determine where are the resources coming from, how long will it take, what will they need to do to turn a profit. All of these things, all of this planning has to be engaged for it to work well. But what James is warning us about, and what he is warning us as followers of Christ, is that our strategies and our plans cannot be counted on apart from the will of the God who works in us. Proverbs 16:9 says this, "The mind of a man plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps." Now, there's nothing wrong with planning ahead. God is not against planning ahead. Please don't take this passage and say, that's why I'm I'm not organized at all because we shouldn't be planning anything. That is not what God teaches us. And that is not what this passage is teaching us. There's nothing wrong with planning ahead. In fact, if you don't make plans, you're not going to accomplish much in life. I promise you, if I was to just show up at JFK Airport on Tuesday morning without any planning, they are not going to let me on a plane. Well, I just thought I'd show up today and maybe I could get on. Do you have a ticket? No, I didn't know I needed a ticket. You can't get on. You should have planned. If I don't plan ahead and pack the right things for where I'm going, I did check the weather, and it is going to be hot in Haiti. Every day is at least 9 degrees. The lows are in the 70s. So I am not packing long underwear and boots and a parka. I'm planning ahead and saying, hey, this is where I'm going. T-shirt, shorts, sandals, yeah, that's the kind of stuff I need to wear in Haiti. Nothing wrong with planning ahead. But as a follower of Christ, your life and my life must be marked by a dependence upon God to lead us. And there also must be in that a resignation to His will. We follow His ways in relation to church life and family life and social life and business life. We are to be sensitive and devoted to obediently performing the will of God. God, what do you have for me? Even in the times when our plans don't work out the way we want. How many of you, by your raised hand, have ever had God interrupt your plans? Someone told me one time, if you want to see God laugh, tell Him what your plans are. Listen, I've had God interrupt plans, even when I thought they were pretty good plans. I've had Him interrupt plans, even when I thought I was in the middle of following His plan for me. There was a point in my life when I was first called into the ministry. My parents worked for Westminster College in New Wilmington, PA, Western PA. And because they worked for the college, I had free tuition to go to that school. And I thought, God, you have provided for me. I will start taking night classes. I was working as the maintenance man at my home church, which I loved doing that job. It's one of my favorite jobs because of the setting I was in, and I got to hang around the pastors, and it was just a fun job. And I thought, Lord, you provide. I can get my religion degree from Westminster College, become a pastor, still keep this great job. And I was so sure that that was the plan, I went out and bought a brand new car. I ordered it, special. Nice black sports car. Which, by the way, is why Donna married me, because I had that car. No, that's not why she married me. I know that's not why she married me, because it wasn't too long after that we traded it in on a minivan. Anyway, I thought this was the plan. I thought this was God's will. He didn't say it wasn't His will. And He did call me, and He did open up that door, and I was taking classes and heading that direction. But after about a year and a half of taking night classes while I was working, God interrupted the plan. And He said, I want you to go away to Bible college. Now see, that didn't make any sense to me. Because at going away to Bible college, I didn't have free tuition at the Bible college. I had free tuition at this college. So God, really? That doesn't sound like a good plan to me. But what I had to learn was, and I guess what I still learn sometimes, because it's not like you get one lesson and that's all you ever need, is that I may have plans, and I may even believe those plans are in accordance with God's will. And they may be. But that does not mean that God cannot interrupt in the middle of that plan and give you further direction and further information and lead you even in a different direction. That doesn't mean you were going the wrong way. It just meant that was only one step and you could only see so far. You began to plan ahead before God gave you the whole picture. It's kind of like the story with Abraham and Isaac. When God said to Abraham, take your son and take him to the mountain. And I want you to worship me by offering him as a sacrifice. And you know that it says in the story that the next morning Abraham woke up and he him and his servant, and they had wood, and they're making their way to the mountain. And Isaac says, Dad, I see the wood. I see everything we need to worship God, but where's the lamb? Where's the sacrifice? And Abraham says, God will provide. And they keep walking. But in his mind, he already knew it was supposed to be Isaac. And we flash forward to the scene where he tells Isaac, and Isaac submits himself to his father. And Isaac is laying on top of the altar, and Abraham raises the knife. Now, if he had only listened to God that one time and never received any further direction, he would have plunged that knife into Isaac's body. But it says that while he lifted the knife, something caught his attention. And behind him, behold, a ram was caught in the thicket. What I'm saying is, you can be following God's will for your life, and then he can still interrupt the direction. He can still give you further understanding as to what he wants for you today. Yesterday you were following him and according to the knowledge you had, what he was asking of you. But today he may step in and say, here's another part of the plan you didn't know about. These can be confusing times. These can result in broken dreams. These can be the result of unrealized expectations. But yet in the midst of it, because you are keeping your eyes on Christ, because you are trusting him, you understand this is just a part of God's direction. Sometimes even his testing of your faith. When it comes to business practices, or in our day, we certainly can understand when it comes to political aspirations, there are some people who are more than willing to take advantage of people. There are some business people who are more than willing to take advantage of people. There are some politicians who are more than willing to take advantage of the situation, of the power that is entrusted to them. And they do it with a rationalization. It's just business. It's just business. It's nothing personal. It's just the way things work. We should all understand that. We must keep in mind the fact that God is going to hold us accountable for everything in our lives. Yes, even in how we conduct our business. It is a very poor testimony of anyone who claims to be a Christian if they are living a double life. And what I mean by that is you come to church and you behave one way in church, and then when you get out into your job or into your business or into politics or whatever field outside of the church you engage in, and you think it's okay to behave differently. That does not bring honor to the name of Christ. If that is the way you behave, what it will do is it will cause others to look at your actions and your behaviors and give them a reason to wonder, are they even really saved? Are they even really a Christian? Now you say, wait a minute, Pastor, I was here last week. Are you trying to judge? No, I'm not trying to judge. I cannot make that final determination on whether or not you're saved. That is reserved solely for God. He knows where your heart is. But I can point out what God's Word says about whether such actions and attitudes rightly reflect an accurate level of obedience to the Lord in your life. I can point that out. A person who claims to have faith but has nothing to back it up Is that type of faith enough to save him? That was James' question way back in the beginning of our study, back in chapter 1. You say you have faith but no works. I show my faith by my works. If you don't have works that back up your faith, can that faith save you? Great question. Again, we are not saved by our works. I will keep pointing to that. We're not saved by our works. But if we are saved, if we do know Jesus Christ as our Lord and we're following him, we have been created in him for good works. Good works will follow the life of a believer who is obediently following the Lord. That is what will happen. So James is warning those who are ordering their lives in regard to daily decisions without consideration of God's will, without thinking about what God may want them to do. And he reminds us that in the scope of eternity, our lives appear as a vapor. A vapor. In our home, this time of year, cold weather, the air is dry, we run humidifiers. In the summertime, we're trying to take moisture out of the air. In the wintertime, we're trying to put it back in. And we have those cool mists. I think they're neat, to be honest. The cool mist things that you just put water in and it shoots this micro fog out. And it rises from the spout. And then all of a sudden it's gone. That is the way our lives are in the scope of eternity. We don't often like to think about that. But we need to. We need to be aware of it. It is part of life. I am finding as I get older, I think about it more. When I was 30, I didn't think about it at all. Well, I shouldn't say at all. Maybe once in a while, a tragedy happens, you will think about it. But now, as I am getting older, I think about the reality as I have lived more years than I have ahead. Life is but a vapor. So it matters what you do while your vapor can be seen. It matters how you impact others while your vapor is visible. Verse 15. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live, and also do this or that. Okay, James is saying, listen, just take into account that God is in charge of your life. The right understanding is, if it's in God's plan for me, this is what I plan to do. I can make my plans, but I leave room that God may have a different plan. Think of how many people in the Bible had made plans and decisions concerning their lives when God chose to intervene and alter their course. It was not in Abraham's original plan for him to gather his family and belongings and travel to another land. That was not part of his original plan, but it was God's plan. It was not in Joseph's plan to be sold by his brothers as a slave in Egypt so that he would eventually save the life of his family. He didn't go to his brother, hey guys, I got this great plan. In a little while, there's going to be a caravan coming through. I know you don't like me. I know I'm Dad's favorite. I know you're jealous. I know. But here's my plan. You're going to rip my coat off, dip it in some blood so Dad thinks I died. And then when this caravan comes by, you sell me to them. And then they're going to take me to Egypt. And then I'm going to work as a slave for a while. And then I'm going to get accused of something I didn't do. And they're going to throw me in prison. And then when I'm in prison, I'm going to meet these two guys who serve the Pharaoh. And one of them's going to remember me 2 years afterward and tell Pharaoh about me. And then I'm going to be second in command. What do you think of that plan, guys? That was not Joseph's plan, but it was God's plan. It was not in Moses' plan to return to Egypt and lead the Jewish people through the wilderness. That was not in his plan, but it was God's plan. It was not Gideon's plan to take on tens of thousands of the Midianite troops with only 300 men of his own, but it was God's plan. It was not in Peter's plan for his life to give up his fishing business and become an apostle and church leader, but it was God's plan. It was not Paul's plan to leave a promising and successful career as a Pharisee in the Jewish religion, to become a missionary of the very group he was persecuting, but it was God's plan. And you may have plans in your life right now that you've made, but make sure you allow God to order your footsteps that will put you exactly in His will. And if you are in a place where your plans or your course in life has been changed, look for how the Lord is replacing your plan with His, instead of lamenting over why your plan didn't work. Now, I know there will be a little bit of that. That's normal. There will be a little bit of, God, this is not what I had planned. This is not what I thought was going to happen. But if you are having your eyes on Christ, you will come to the place of saying, okay, God, show me what's next. Show me what you want me to do. Show me how you're going to work this out for your glory. Show me how you're going to bring something good out of this, because I know that's what you've promised to those who love you and are called according to your purpose. So I love you, and I want to do your will, so you show me how you're going to do this. Work it out. That is the yielding and the submitting of our will to His. It is what Jesus did in the Garden of Gethsemane. Father, if there's any other way, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. We must have that same attitude. Lord, this is what I planned, and this is what I thought you were doing, and I was being obedient, and you were leading me. And now it's harder than I thought it was going to be. This happened in my life, and I wasn't expecting it. This is not what I anticipated happening at this stage in my life. But nevertheless, your will be done, not mine. Also, verse 15 is not to be used as some type of a mantra spoken in mechanical repetition. Pastor, I'll be in church Sunday, God willing. Now, I don't know how many times. Now, if you've said this to me recently, I am not picking on you. I've heard this many, many, many years, okay? And anytime I've heard it, I've always thought, why wouldn't God be willing for you to be in church? And I thought, you know what? There may be some occasions. If you're witnessing to someone, leading someone to Christ, maybe you stopped in at Dunkin' Donuts or somewhere, and all of a sudden God opened a door, and you're leading them to Christ, you have my permission not to come to church and finish out bringing that person into the kingdom. Or maybe there is something tragic that occurs and you have to be in the emergency room. That's a good reason not to be in church. So I think there are circumstances that can arise where God may not want you in church, where His plan for you that day may be a little different than you expected. But I think when we say that, this is what we really mean. I'll be there if nothing better comes along. Or if I don't get too tired. Or unless I just don't feel like going. Because I say that because let's take another scenario, if it's not church. Because we really, do we ever hear that said for any other occasion? I mean, if you have tickets to go to a big ball game, do you buy the tickets and say, I'm going to the game, God willing? If you're invited to a movie with a friend, well, I'll meet you there, God willing. Or if there's some other event you really want to go to, do you say, I'll be there, God willing? No, probably we say things like this. Count me in. I'll be there. Count me in. Nothing in the world could keep me from missing that. A herd of wild horses couldn't keep me away. But we rarely say that about church. Now, not you guys, because obviously you're here. All right? Just saying, there are some people who say stuff like that. And again, I only point these things out because I want us to have a genuine awareness of how God is at work in our lives. A genuine awareness. He is God. He can intervene at any moment in time and move our lives in a different direction because He's God. Now, He does not abuse that. I know there are times in life, there have been times in life where I have been afraid to say, God, whatever you want me to do, you just tell me and I'll do it. Because in the back of our minds, there is always what if He asked me to go to Africa? I'm not saying that then. I'm not saying it. I'm not leaving that door open. Funny thing is, when I was a teenager, I went through a time in my life where I was praying. I was trying to make a decision, and I was at an altar, Living Waters Camp. Many of you know where that was about, and I was at the altar, and out of my mouth, I was so desperate to know God's will. I said, God, whatever you want me to do, wherever you want me to go, even if it's Africa, I'll do your will. Obviously, it wasn't His will at that point for me to go to Africa because He spoke to me. It was one of the times in my life where God spoke to me very clearly. And He simply said, I want you to stay where you're at. And I said, okay. And God He developed my life from there on out. I say that because as we get older and more mature, we should not be afraid to open our lives to the will of God. If you're afraid to open your life to the will of God, it is because you don't completely trust His goodness. It's because you're afraid He's going to make you do something that you're going to hate. It's because you're afraid He's going to take something away from you that you don't want to have taken away. And I'm here to tell you that when you know God is good and He is faithful and He has your best interest in His mind, when He develops the plan for your life, it is for your good. Doesn't mean there won't be difficulties. It doesn't mean there won't be even periods of suffering and trial. But it will result in your good. The things in my life that I've not always understood about God's will, I've never looked back on and said, Lord, if you had only done it my way, my life would be better. I look at my life where I'm at right now and I think, Lord, I could have never come up with this plan. I would have never come up with this plan. I would have never. Wasn't even on my radar screen. But it was His. Well, we got to move on here quickly. Verse 16. But as it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. Basically, what this means is, if we want to live our lives without any input from God, if we want to live our lives without direction, without concern for His will, The individual can say, hey, I got my life under control. God, I don't need you. I already know where my life is headed. I already have my plans. I don't need yours. James says it's not only boasting, it's not only arrogance, it is evil. Verse 17, therefore, to one who knows the right thing to do and does not do it, to him it is sin. When you know the right thing to do and you don't do it, it is sin. This actually goes beyond the listing of sins that we know as Christians we should not engage in. Many times that's all people think Christians are. We live by the rules of don't. Don't do this. Don't do that. Thou shalt not. They think that's all we do. The reality is God tells us a lot of other things that we should do more than what we shouldn't do. In fact, if we do the things that he tells us we should do, we won't even have to worry about the things he tells us not to do. Think about the things that you know you're supposed to do. To love your neighbor. You don't ever have to pray, God, do you want me to love my neighbor? I'm not sure. Do you want me to love them? You don't ever have to pray. You know it's his will. Pray for your enemy. Lord, do you want me to pray for that no good, lousy skunk of a neighbor? You don't ever have to. You know, he's already said, pray for your enemy. Bless others rather than curse. God, you know what they did to me. I am justified in doing something to them. What do you think? Is that your plan? Remember when the disciples were in that one town and they didn't get a very warm welcome and they kind of got kicked out, and one of the disciples said to Jesus on the way out of town, you want us to call down fire on them? Remember that? Don't we feel like that when we've been mistreated? You better watch who you're messing with. I'm going to tell you right now. I know the man upstairs. And Jesus said, you don't even know what you're asking. I've not come to this world for that. Pray for them. Okay, Lord, do you want me to encourage my brother or sister? Is that part of your plan for me? I'm not sure on that one. I kind of have this, I don't know, maybe it's what you want me to do, maybe it's not. You don't ever have to wonder, he says. He commands us to encourage one another. Should I go to my brother if I have something against them? You know, they did something to me, and every time I see their face, I just want to wipe it off their head. Should I do that, Lord? Will you open the door for me to do that? You don't ever have to pray that prayer, because you know his will is that you should go to that person and talk to them. To the things that you know to do are right. If you do not do them, it is sin. This certainly adds to what Paul means when he writes, the things I know I shouldn't do, I do. And the things I know I should do, I don't do. May you be zealous in not only avoiding the temptations to commit sin. Be zealous against that. We've talked about that. Resist the devil. He will flee from you. Yes, be zealous in running from temptation. But may you also be zealous in doing the things that you know is God's will for you to do. Be zealous in doing what is right.